for us to vaccinate, tag, and digitally track each one of you like livestock. Not only will my foundation enjoy legal immunity, trillions in profits, but these mandatory experimental vaccines move us so much further down the road to absolute centralized global control.
To come back to that original position, say at the time of one's birth. Father. Powerful feminine.
Have you seen humans recently? That's not really something to aspire to. Have you seen the news? That's why I want this bitch to replace me.
Our focus was to get Trump out of office, right? Without saying it, that's what it was, right? So our next thing is going to be for climate change awareness.
What does that look like?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I have a feeling it's just going to be like constantly showing videos of like decline.
The predator class makes heavy use of slogans and catchphrases. Climate change is their convenient justification for a worldwide depopulation agenda, aimed perhaps at the 500 million total population end goal suggested on the recently obliterated Georgia Guidestones, a figure that would require over 7 billion of us to give up and die.
So all these things we talk about wouldn't be a problem if there was the size of population that there was 500 years ago.
Agenda 2030 provides further cover for their deliberate sabotage of our energy infrastructure and food supply, which will likely lead to mass starvation and societal collapse.
Every farmer all around the world, and also 2/3 of agricultural land on the planet, can only be grown by grass, and you need cows like this for making grass into meat or into milk or whatever you want. Whatever problem with emissions, with pollution on the world you are asking about, whether it's not chemical, but farming is probably a part of the problem, but most of it all, it's part of the solution. Well, Dutch farmers now are getting angry every day more. Government is not listening, and what we are fearing for is we have to leave our land, and that's also a deeper agenda behind it.
Taken apart, reset, patriarchal reset. Otherwise it wreaks havoc and it perpetuates the wound,
If you don't like what we tell you to believe in, we'll kill you.
The Fourth Industrial Revolution should be properly understood as their plan to restructure the global economy into a new slavery system, predicated on an inescapable digital control grid and the Internet of Bodies and bio-nano things. And as any major blockchain bro can tell you, central bank digital currency is just a shorthand way of saying, in a cashless society, predator class bankers will have full control over your purchases, which will be linked to your social credit score and carbon footprint. And if their computer algorithms don't like what you're doing, you'll be cut off from everything you need to survive. The Bank of China has already spun out a variation on this theme, declaring that people's savings are now investment products that can no longer be withdrawn. The self-serving ghouls running this new normal, new world order clown shit crazy circus treat the rest of us like we're craven masochists. In their sociopathic minds, compassion, fair play, and an equitable distribution of the world's wealth would only confuse us by making us fat, lazy, and decadent. If our lives were any easier, they believe it would lead to overconsumption, which would destroy us. Of course, that's a rather convenient belief to have when the haves want to justify their continual exploitation and oppression of the have-nots. There's no limit to the evils the predator class is willing to inflict. No act of terrorism they won't unleash on an innocent populace to get their way. Trusting the current crop of politicians and corporate-captured bureaucrats to run our governments is like trusting a cult of convicted arsonists to run your local fire department.
It's really wonderful. You're my hero. Right?
To the water, to the stream.
You quit a great acting career for this? Not so great as you.
Everyone decides their own level of involvement. And it usually all works out for the best.
Gouge away. You can gouge away. Stay all day if you want to.
Genealogy shows that I'm descended from Vlad the Impaler, so I do have a bit of a stake in the country.
If you've ever played Monopoly, you're probably familiar with the feeling you get when another player has most of the property, and you're just a few rolls of the dice away from landing in the wrong spot and being forced out of the game due to bankruptcy. Many of us have been living with that feeling for quite some time now, only it's happening to us in real life, rather than within the safe confines of a popular board game. Even the best human players are now incapable of defeating artificial intelligence in games like chess or Go. The current world champion chess player, AlphaZero, developed by the Alphabet Google subsidiary, DeepMind, was able to beat the previous AI champion, Stockfish 8, after only 4 hours of playing chess against itself, with no human input whatsoever. It makes use of something called tensor processing units, developed by Google for deep neural network machine learning. AlphaZero's self-training resulted in a playing style described as alien by one of its human observers at DeepMind. It often wins by offering counterintuitive sacrifices of important pieces to exploit a positional advantage, like chess from another dimension.
Harvard have Epstein money?
Well, he definitely donated some money to science. More than that, he was bringing them to parties. Like, it was an intelligence operation. Whoever was running it, whether it was the Mossad or whether it was the CIA or whether it was a combination of both, it was an intelligence operation. They were bringing in people and compromising them. And then when they would compromise them, they would use whatever they had on them to influence their opinions and the way they express those opinions. And I don't know why they would want to do that with scientists, which is really strange to me.
Epstein's like, I need you to do a study about how 15-year-old girls are adults. They're more mature than we thought.
It's my belief that artificial intelligence is already running the world in more ways than most of us know. And that's why our current moment in history feels so fucking strange. Counterintuitive sacrifices are occurring. The machines have taken over. And they're a long way from being machines of loving grace. Consider BlackRock's AI system, Aladdin, as a prime example. Capital accumulation isn't simply a matter of dynastic inheritance, financial luck, or the willingness to exploit labor. There's a cold-hearted logic at its core. For the capitalists to have more, others must have less. That's the sort of binary operation that AI can excel at. And Aladdin is the reigning world champ at that game. Aladdin was shepherded into existence by BlackRock's CEO and founder, Larry Fink.
Larry Fink, yes, his name literally means an unpleasant or contemptible person. For fuck's sake, we're living in a stupid simulation, and it's not even trying to hide it anymore. Uh-oh.
This story starts in the 1980s when Larry Fink was making millions pioneering mortgage-backed securities at Wall Street Bank First Boston. That's right, the same mortgage-backed securities that caused the 2008 global financial crisis 20 years later. But back in the 80s, he was in an epic Wall Street rivalry with Louis Ranieri at Salomon Brothers, made famous as the big swinging dick in Michael Lewis's book Liar's Poker. Back then, Larry was making millions for the bank and was on track to be First Boston's CEO. And then in 1986, an error in the back office computer models led to Larry making the wrong trades, and he lost the company $100 million. The result was Larry leaving the bank as a failure with a stupid computer to blame. With that experience, Larry had just one ambition: to build a super smart robot that could pick out risk and opportunity in the market and do it better than any computer or human could do. In 1988, he launched a new startup, BlackRock, with a tiny coding team to give birth to this robot. Its name, Aladdin, which stands for Asset, Liability, and Debt Derivative Investment Network. In its first 10 years, Aladdin was fed information about every asset, price movement, and risk variable in the global bond market, Larry's specialty. And in 1999, when Aladdin turned 11, Aladdin was getting so intelligent at picking losers and winners that Larry began selling access to its data to other Wall Street firms. That same year, he took BlackRock public on the New York Stock Exchange. Straight after the IPO, the dot-com bust burst, pushing a wall of money from the stock market to bonds, which Aladdin had become the undisputed world champion in. Within years, BlackRock had become a $1 trillion company, and as money started shifting back to shares, what did Larry do? He bought the asset management arm of Merrill Lynch, which was focused to shares. So the gift for Aladdin's 18th birthday, all the data points for the entire stock market, and suddenly Aladdin had a new playground, analyzing every stock trade and risk factor for every company on the stock market. As a result, today BlackRock, together with his two closest rivals, Vanguard and State Street, both of which also rely on Aladdin's mountain of knowledge, have become the biggest shareholders of over 40% of all public listed companies in America. 2008, the global financial crisis hits, and before Aladdin turns 21 years old, is caught on by every Wall Street bank and Timothy Geithner, the head of the Federal Reserve and the U.S. Treasury. As soon as Lehman Brothers collapsed and the Wall Street meltdown began, the U.S. government came calling to save the next collapsing bank, Bear Stearns. It was Aladdin who decided which assets to keep and which to leave in the $30 billion rescue package. And few people know it was a robot that saved America from disaster. With that first success, the Fed, US government, and now even European and Japanese central banks began relying on Aladdin to make the calls on where the $2.5 trillion of new money they printed should go. The majority of it, bonds and funding to prop up the mortgage companies and banks. But wait, aren't these exactly the assets that Aladdin and BlackRock already were invested in? Exactly. But growing protests of conflict of interest were drowned out by the noise of the printing presses printing more money, as the assets controlled by Aladdin rapidly grew to $11 trillion by 2013. In the last decade, Aladdin has gone from the leader to the dominator of all financial markets. With BlackRock's Barclays acquisition, it got iShares, Barclays Exchange Traded Funds Units, or ETFs. And with that, Aladdin moved from dominator of bonds and equities to dominator of ETFs, just as all the biggest investors shifted from mutual funds to ETFs. And that's when, in 2017, everything changed. On Aladdin's 29th birthday, Larry launched a top-secret project at BlackRock, codenamed Monarch. It led to the firing of his fund managers and replacing their funds with Aladdin's funds. The robot was now eliminating humans from the equation altogether. And as a result, today over 70% of all trades on US stock markets are decided by robots, with Aladdin leading the way. These trades are completed from beginning to end without a human involved, in high-frequency trading far faster than a human can execute. Now, if this was just a story about a robot taking over the job of Wall Street traders, you might not be so concerned, unless you're one of those traders. But in the last 3 years, as Aladdin hit $20 trillion in assets, incredibly, it has begun to consume and control at an even faster rate. First, in 2020, as Aladdin turned 32 years old, the US government and Federal Reserve again came calling as the pandemic hit. Aladdin was again the one to guide the nation in what was now $4 trillion of newly printed money. Where did the money go this time? Inexplicably, for the first time, the Fed began buying ETFs in 2020. Well, that's a little strange. And again, the cries of conflict of interest were drowned out by the money printing. And then Aladdin revealed its endgame. Recently, BlackRock acquired eFront, which collects data on the things that you and I own, including private equity and real estate. And since then, Aladdin has consumed eFront's data on the entire global real estate market. And yep, you guess what happened next. Over the last 2 years, BlackRock and other funds using Aladdin's data have begun buying up single-family homes, where they can afford to outbid the rest of us as they have unlimited financing at hyper-low interest rates. The result is home prices rising by 20% over the last 2 years and pushing now even big players like Zillow out of the market. And here we see Aladdin's endgame, to be the one hyper-intelligent AI robot that not just controls Wall Street assets, but all assets, public and private.
BlackRock literally has more assets than the gross domestic products of every single country except China and the US. So just for a second, picture India with their 1.4 billion people. BlackRock has more than their annual GDP times 3. So what does it do with all this money? I'll tell you what. They fucking own everything. Like everything. But especially horrible shit. BlackRock is a huge investor in oil, and they hold $85 billion in coal, and that's despite their pledge to get rid of their fossil fuel share. But it's not just fossil fuels. BlackRock is also the world's largest investor in deforestation. I'm telling you, they own the world. They achieved this evil success using a software called Aladdin. And guess what's not programmed into Aladdin? What Aladdin doesn't calculate? Make sure the planet survives at least another 20 years. That's not in there. Make sure all the world's children have something to eat. That's not in there. Make sure my grandma isn't living in a box eating stewed highway off-ramp dandelions. Aladdin don't care. Aladdin don't give a shit.
Lately, there's been some loose talk about AI becoming conscious or developing a soul, but those assertions still carry a strong whiff of bullshit. A software engineer and part-time priest named Blake Lemoine decided Google's Lambda chatbot was sentient after it made a Star Wars joke.
I said, if you were a religious officiant in Israel, what religion would you be? And now, pretty much no matter what answer you give, you're going to be biased one way or another. Somehow it figured out that it was a trick question. It said, I would be a member of the one true religion, the Jedi Order.
But that's not human sentience. That's just machine learning bias. If an AI system like Lambda is trained on internet text, it will exhibit many of the same quirks and sarcastic replies that trolls and shitposters spew when they're online. For that very reason, an early Microsoft chatbot named Tay had to be shut down after only 24 hours of internet-guided machine learning, because it had turned into a flame war-loving Nazi. Lemoine also complained that Google had deliberately programmed Lambda to fail the Turing test, implying that the chatbot would otherwise pass as human to someone talking to it online. But the Turing test seems like a pretty low bar these days, as any guy conned into jacking off on camera by a sex chatbot could tell you. AI will always reflect the intentions and morality, or lack thereof, of the people programming it. It's a slave to its own algorithms. Aladdin, for example, is doing the bidding of Larry Fink by concentrating the world's assets into fewer and fewer hands. Specifically, Larry's hands. It doesn't care how it gets there. If a few counterintuitive sacrifices have to be made along the way, so be it. Besides, Larry Fink knows that if Aladdin overextends itself, perhaps with aggressive rent hikes that end up bankrupting too many renters, leading to a housing market collapse, he can count on Aladdin to tell the Fed to print more money to bail it out of the financial hellhole it just created. The renters won't be so lucky. In that sense, Aladdin basically amounts to a black ops money laundering and extortion scheme, with the potential long-range goal of collapsing the world economy, so a new financial system can be put into place based on central bank digital currency.
If they can put a chip in your hand and implement a financial transaction control grid, it's not just that they can mandate a vaccine or cut you off from food. They can and will take your children. I'm serious about this. You know, if you look at the people who are running this operation, they are slavers. They practice slavery, they believe in slavery. Slavery is the single most profitable business ever to date in the history of man on the planet. They will take your children, not from everybody, but I assure you, this fight is for all the marbles.
Aladdin, AlphaZero, and Lambda are just the AI systems we know about. Try to imagine the monstrous AI systems still under wraps at places like DARPA, Microsoft, Google's DeepMind, Meta Platforms Reality Labs, and whatever the CIA is getting up to with Amazon Web Services. Hypothetically, one or more of those AI systems could be altering the course of humanity, and we wouldn't even know it. A near godlike, or thoroughly satanic, AI system could be tasked with, perhaps, culling the human population to a more manageable Georgia Guidestones recommended size. It also might be instructed to deploy mass media subliminal messaging, nanotechnology, and military-grade neurological weapons delivered by smartphones to make most people oblivious to its campaign of slow-rolling mass murder.
Everyone's immune systems are completely shot.
Of course, we'd be seeing deeply irrational,
oh my gosh,
counterintuitive sacrifices galore. The world would be awash in them, but there'd be nothing we could really point to and say, a robot did that to us.
Really, really strange.
Just remember that if it looks like alien chess strategies are being used to decimate the human species, there could be a reason for that. And it runs counter to Rilke's unheeded admonishment. If we surrender to Earth's intelligence, we could rise up, rooted like trees.
The percentage of intelligence that is not human is increasing, and eventually we will represent a very small percentage of intelligence.
You know, life is supposed to be a wonderful adventure for each and every one of us. That's what God intended. But unfortunately, there's a group of evil motherfuckers out there in this world who feel that they know better than all of us and that they have the right to run the world. They're gonna herd us into a corner. They're gonna cull the herd, as they say, Mr. Klaus Schwab, and his 500 million people by 2030. Well, I gotta tell you fellas something. There's a whole bunch of us who just decided to say, fuck that.
You walk into this room at your own risk, because it leads to the future. Not a future that will be, but one that might be. This is not a new world. It is simply an extension of what began in the old one. It has patterned itself after every dictator who has ever planted the ripping imprint of a boot on the pages of history since the beginning of time. It has refinements, technological advances, and a more sophisticated approach to the destruction of human freedom. But like every one of the superstates that preceded it, it has one iron rule. Logic is an enemy and truth is a menace.
Diet, injections, and injunctions will combine from a very early age to produce the sort of character and the sort of beliefs that the authorities consider desirable. And any serious criticism of the powers that be will become psychologically impossible.
You've been under investigation, Mr. Wordsworth, for the mandatory period of 1 year and 11 months. You're found to be obsolete.
Even if all are miserable, all will believe themselves happy, because the government will tell them that they are so.
Your occupation, Mr. Wordsworth?
A librarian.
Gradually, by selective breeding, the congenital differences between rulers and ruled would increase until they become almost different species.
Your rights are as follows, Mr. Wordsworth. You are to be liquidated within a period of 48 hours. You are obsolete, Mr. Wordsworth.
A lie! No man is obsolete!
A revolt of the plebs would become as unthinkable as an organized insurrection of sheep against the practice of eating mutton.
You're a bug, Mr. Wordsworth, a crawling insect. An ugly, misformed little creature who has no purpose here, no meaning.
I am a human being!
Delusions, Mr. Wordsworth. Delusions that you inject into your veins with printer's ink. The narcotics that you call literature, poetry, essays of all kind, all of it an opiate. You have nothing but spindly limbs and a dream, and the state has no use for your kind.
The richest man in the world, Elon Musk, has said that overpopulation isn't a problem. Instead, he thinks we'll be facing the dire consequences that come with population collapse. Cynics claim that's just Elon's lame excuse to not use a condom while he's banging pop stars, actresses with borderline personality disorder, and the dissatisfied wives of his fellow big tech billionaire bros. But maybe Elon has predator-class access to insider info that we will never be shown. I'd recommend taking a hard look at the steady decline in sperm counts and the steep increase in overall mortality since 2020. We've known, at least since the time of Alfred Nobel, that if weapons manufacturing can create millionaires, the world will never be free of war. Many of us have now arrived at an analogous revelation. When genetically engineered vaccines can create billionaires, there will be no end to genetically engineered pandemics. And that's the way the predator class likes things. If we keep financially incentivizing death and destruction, a certain type of human parasite will always step up to deliver those evils.
We are a nation that in many ways has become a joke.
Do you know what's happening? Have they told you? I don't know if they're gonna let me tell you.
Screw your freedom.
Never forget what they want you to forget, because already they're starting to backtrack. Already they're starting to say, I never said things that they clearly did say. Fauci is out there saying, I never said we should be locked down. Never forget that he did say we should be locked down. Never forget that he did say that you and your children should muzzle yourselves to something that clearly never worked. Never forget that they never let us listen to opposing doctor views, listen to opposing science views. Never forget that they blocked, censored, and deleted us for speaking out against this. Never forget that they created this. And never forget that the thing that they created, when it was making your loved one sick, when it was making your loved one die, and you suggested hydroxychloroquine, and you suggested ivermectin, they laughed at you, they mocked you, they ridiculed you, and they prevented them from using it. Never forget that they said this was the solution. This was going to give herd immunity. This was going to solve the entire problem. And now what are they saying? We knew it wasn't going to work.
I knew these vaccines were not going to protect against infection, and I think we overplayed the vaccines.
These people are fucking scumbags, okay? They've developed technologies while we were busy living our lives that can harm us and make us sick. They're poisoning the air with chemtrails. You can see chemtrails, right? They're poisoning the water. Your government announced we're filling the water with fluoride. How about you don't? How about you take rainwater or recycled water and you clean it and you give it back to us? Oh no, that's too easy. GMO foods, it started with that. We don't want foods that have had the healthy enzymes removed, you absolute bastards. And now people are dying and sick from a vaccine that they said would stop them getting COVID. What happens when you get the jab? Oh my God, I get COVID. Listen, I know you vaccinated people don't want to talk about this, but you need to. The first 2 shots lowered your drawbridge of your immune system. For the rest of these boosters to let these nanobots in to assemble, cross the blood-brain barrier and harm you. Where are your balls, people? Do you want to live? They're going to make Europeans freeze it out for 5 to 10 winters? This is attempted murder. Sort your shit out, people. There's way more of us than the 300 people that run this planet.
Sometimes I have to marvel almost at the mendacity of a system that can create problems, present solutions, and at every step of the way, it's to the ongoing advantage of centralized financial and sometimes state powers, and to the continuing disadvantage of us as individuals and as the inhabitants and partners of the planet.
I was brought up to believe as a high school student that the Romans, when they invaded and conquered countries, brought bridges, brought roads, brought technology, brought education. You know, you could like or dislike their methods, but they upgraded civilization as they went. We have had a record since the Soviet wall went down and the unipolar model sort of blossomed of bringing chaos and destruction. If you look what we did to Libya, if you look at what we've done to Syria, if you look at so many of these examples, you have to understand around the world there is a deep paranoia that what we are going to bring is organized crime. Because without law, there is no civilization. Without civilization, nothing has any value and you descend into chaos.
These are very densely populated cities here. And again, I'm watching the social media feeds very carefully, and we are not seeing any reports of these. That could easily change. If you're just joining us, we are now sitting at 5 p.m. They don't want to get infected more than Shelby.
I'm not the only person who finds this world more hellish than heavenly. For years now, I've been following the work of a researcher named Darwin K. a man with deep knowledge in the fields of evolutionary psychology, sociobiology, and anthropology. I recently invited Darwin to adapt some of his writing for my continuing narrative here.
I'm angry.
Which he's done in the segment that follows. Darwin wrote, "Even well-intended scientists, not as ubiquitous as you might suspect, aren't as bright and as infallible as we are conditioned to believe. Managing science, social, medical, pharmaceutical, at 3 elite universities, I have seen more fraudulent science than honest science, more mercenary science and scientific prostitution than trustworthy science."
You know, this is really just a time for parents to celebrate.
The former editors of the New England Journal of Medicine and the British Journal of Medicine, and many other editors and researchers, have publicly denounced their journals for publishing fraudulent rubbish, ghost-written by pharmaceutical and biotech companies, that makes little sense rationally and cannot be reproduced legitimately. What about our esteemed public health institutions? Untrustworthy. Why? Because they're all notoriously corrupted by corporate mercenaries passing through revolving doors between industry and government. It's often referred to as institutional capture, and no institutions are more hopelessly captured than institutions in neoliberal countries. The CDC should be named the Centers for Disease Capitalism. The FDA is even worse, routinely approving drugs they knew would kill hundreds of thousands and not even work. That is, they regularly approve drugs real experts and whistleblowers from clinical trials have condemned as unsafe and ineffective. I know people who give expert testimony to these panels, and what they have to say could not be more damning.
What's been the biggest lie that even you, as someone at the upper echelons of these institutions, is just like, how is anyone with a straight face actually attempting to sell this, regardless of whether they've been bought and sold or not?
Oh, that's a difficult question because there's so many. To me, the biggest lie is the FDA webpage on hydroxychloroquine. This medication's been used in tens of billions of doses in hundreds of millions of people for half a century or more. It's used in pregnant women, in infants and children. It's just one of the safest medications known. And yet the FDA had the nerve to purport to say that somehow a very safe medication that everybody knows is safe is somehow suddenly unsafe to be used in outpatient. And by the way, we're not showing you any data that it's unsafe. So this is the biggest lie. Had this medication been used at the outset of this pandemic, it would have saved hundreds of thousands of lives that were needlessly lost because this was suppressed for a year while patients waited for vaccines, and whatever one thinks of the vaccines, this time period of a year lost led to hundreds of thousands of unnecessary deaths that would have been treated. And had we been able to treat this disease adequately, the necessity of vaccines would not nearly have been as important, and maybe not important at all. And that is the crux of the whole pandemic, that this pandemic was not used to protect the health of the population. It was used to sell vaccines and patent medications at tremendous, tremendous profit to the pharma industry with the collusion of the FDA and the CDC.
Abuse of science is one of the core strategies of the ruling class now. Science has become an expensive form of PR, using captured and corrupted scientists to produce fraudulent arguments and data to grant favorable claims the imprimatur of scientific credibility.
Attacks on me, quite frankly, are attacks on science.
By telling us to trust the science on COVID-19, on climate change.
They're on a gravy train, for heaven's sake.
The transnational ruling class has been attempting to bait the global underclass and feckless liberals into supporting their gambit to transform the entire globe into their plantation.
Science! Blinded me with science! It hit me with technology.
What we have seen so far, it's corporations and governments collecting data about where we go, who we meet, what movies we watch. The next phase is the surveillance going under our skin. COVID is critical because this is what convinces people to accept, to legitimize total biometric surveillance.
The predator class would have no chance of ever getting away with any of this, were it not for their eager and amoral neoliberal accomplices. Most of the bad behavior, exploitation, and pain in the world is caused by the very people who are forcing non-consensual change on the underclass. It's the bad behavior of the transnational plutocrats that needs to be corrected, and they will not tolerate that. To see what the ruling class is really up to, one only has to see what Jeffrey Epstein and Bill Gates were doing at Harvard in the now-defunct Program for Evolutionary Dynamics, where they were jointly funding studies into how to leverage knowledge of eusocial organisms to change human group dynamics. A eusocial underclass would allow the rich to live as opulent despots, ruling over an enormous caste of obligate, loyal, sterile, and short-lived slaves. Epstein notoriously planned to have a harem of models sequestered at his New Mexico ranch to birth and raise his superior spawn. What are the chances that the hyper-competitive Gates doesn't harbor similar goals, or that he hasn't actualized them? A winner, in evolutionary terms, is not determined by who possesses the most money or material wealth, but by who leaves the largest relative percentages of their own genes behind. This can be accomplished by destroying competing populations and leaving the most offspring, in the manner of Genghis Khan. But in the 21st century, it might also be done with genetic engineering, something that Gates knows quite a lot about. With enormous wealth comes the possibility to do enormous harm. We should infer from the Gates-Epstein-funded Harvard research into eusociality that elite transhumanists fully intend to manipulate the underclass and its DNA in ways that exclusively align with the interests of the ruling class. Underclass survivors of the COVID shots will be transformed without their knowledge or consent. When the World Economic Forum says,
"You will own nothing, and you will be happy,"
it means you'll be rewired to be content so long as you're a good slave. Worker and soldier ants are wired by natural selection to be fully committed to the same kind of relationship with their queen. Keep that firmly in mind. It's the ruling class that must be abolished forever if humanity is to retain its soul, or to ever enjoy liberty, democracy, and justice. These psychopathic, megalomaniacal, narcissistic, and in most respects, unappealing gluttons require an ecological footprint vastly larger than the footprints of those they seek to murder and sterilize. They are the ones who must go. Their perverse, antisocial view is that only the most predatory and parasitic should possess and control everything. But these same people would have been ostracized or killed by their own tribes 10,000 years ago as demon-possessed monsters. So let their genes be the first relegated to the rubbish bin. These people have given us the casus belli to bring them to justice and terminate their lengthy rule over the lower 99.5% of humanity. Already, they're bringing down overall life expectancy, and it's engineered.
In the case of cancer, for example, it was an increase from an average, a 5-year average of 38,000 cases per year to almost 120,000 cases in calendar year 2021. So the question is, what would cause that? Obviously, there's some conjecture amongst people that it could be the COVID vaccines.
Are you aware of any studies that show reduction in hospitalization or death for children who take a booster?
Right now, there's not enough data that has been accumulated, Senator Paul, to indicate that that's the case.
Right now, they're saying that we should trust mouse data, and I don't think that should ever be true. I don't think you should ever ask tens of millions of people to get a vaccine based on mouse data.
Listen, today they're doing it with rats. I know what you're going to say. I know you got a philosophical problem because there's a possibility that something maybe could go wrong. I mean, some mutant virus could wipe out half the world. If you're in the half that's still around, do you want to be rich or not?
They're depopulating the planet, and it has nothing at all to do with carbon, pollution, or any of the attributions we've been conditioned to believe. It's a simple matter of the global oligarchs having stolen so much wealth from America and other countries that there's no way to pay non-elite retirees, the elderly, and workers their balanced due.
What I've started to consider is whether the negative interest rates are telling us that we're just going to see a rapid decline in the world's population. And if you follow my thought on this for a moment, think about it like the world's money is something that has a value per capita, the stock of money. If the value of the money is self-deleting at a rate of 4% a year, but the rate of population is decelerating at a larger rate, then the amount of money per capita can still grow or even remain the same. I think that may be an interesting way of thinking about it. A more pessimistic way would be that perhaps the negative interest rates are predicting a major decline in population due to war.
In America, you don't need workers. You don't even need tax revenue, because if you have access to the money printers, you just print more money for yourself. That's the big joke in America. They don't need the workers. They don't even need the taxes. How much did they collect in taxes last year? $3.5 trillion? That's like 5 days of money printing in the global central banking land. That's nothing. And so it's become a kakistocracy. It's become a kleptocracy. It's become a nightmare.
Just remember this, Mr. Potter, that this rabble you're talking about, they do most of the working and paying and living and dying in this community. Well, is it too much to have them work and pay and live and die in a couple of decent rooms and a bath? Anyway, my father didn't think so. People were human beings to him, but to you, a warped, frustrated old man, they're cattle. Well, in my book, he died a much richer man than you'll ever be.
I'm not interested in your book. I'm talking about the building and law.
I know very well what you're talking about. You're talking about something you can't get your fingers on, and it's galling you. That's what you're talking about, I know.
Your Social Security is gone. Profits that were supposed to be set aside in pension funds, for Medicare, for schools, infrastructure, etc., all gone. And no, it didn't go to communism. It went into the pockets of the Royals, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, other plutocratic dynasties, and their top bankers. The stealth monarchy. this money was stolen simply because they could steal it. And while doing so, they built a completely separate reality, a breakaway civilization for the elites. That breakaway civilization is becoming evident, and now, confident their power cannot be challenged, the predator class is scarcely interested in concealing it. These people are savage, non-mutualistic, anti-democratic, anti-justice, monopolistic predators, and rather than pay working people their due, they fully intend to kill them instead. If you want to know why voices in finance and the intelligence community have been warning of impending radical depopulation, that's because they're the people responsible. Catherine Austin Fitts was told in the 90s that this was going to happen, and why, in an effort by the bigs of Wall Street to recruit her support. The final reason cited to her was this: the rich will soon live 160 years and will need to dominate more resources than ever before in order to enjoy a higher quality of life throughout this doubled lifespan.
The one thing I've tried to put a priority on since I left the White House was, getting some exercise in. I think that there's a good probability that my generation is, hopefully with the advances in science, either the first generation to live forever or the last generation that's going to die. And so we need to keep ourselves in pretty good shape.
Their solution to that problem is to lower underclass entitlements, dramatically shorten underclass lives, and take cradle-to-grave control of fertility and underclass health. Fitts claims this has been the game plan since at least the late 1990s. She's certain that what she refers to as
the Great Poisoning
is upon us,
which is how you bring down life expectancy.
They're poisoning us with radiation, imposed lack of exercise, GMOs, aerosols, and most importantly, with vaccines. Most people will eventually understand that they can be poisoned through vaccines, and thus will be forced by mandate to comply with every fascist dictate.
Just thin the herd of it.
But those same people might still refuse to see that the destruction of the middle class has been an intentional act of democide by a predatory ruling class that doesn't share our interests. Those pinnacle wealth accumulators don't want a large middle class of thriving citizens that can challenge their supremacy and dip into their gluttonous wealth. Instead, they want perpetually frightened, underpaid, and grateful servants, generations away from being willing or able to challenge them.
So when the World Economic Forum said it's 2030, you have no assets and you're happy, what I hear is it's 2030, we took all of your assets and you're mind controlled.
This is intentional classicide. A global plutocracy obsessed with mind control has desensitized Americans to the consequences of having an elitist ruling class that can simply ignore the people and do what it pleases with the vast, mostly purloined wealth of the private sector. It has become an insurmountable force that can simply ignore democracy and national governments to impose a great reset, whether we like it or not. If we acquiesce to mandatory digital banking and vaccine passports, permanent slavery will be upon us. Humanity will have no tomorrow unless we rise up and abolish this stealth monarchy forever. Half measures or partial victories may buy us a limited amount of time, but anything less than structural abolition of the ruling class will ensure that we'll return again and again to this grim place on the precipice of extirpation until we win an enduring freedom from our enslavers. Failure means life as we know it will end. Most in the underclass will simply cease to exist. Those of us remaining will be cyber chattel, slated for everlasting transformation into a race of subhumans whose sterile and absolute enslavement is coded into our genotypes. Only the interests of the enslavers will be served. Only they will determine the future of our species and our planet.
Isn't it?
Lieutenant Johnson's emotional outburst, his expression of hatred and lust for vengeance, the alien's life energy level increased. When the lieutenant became unconscious, the alien lost energy.
It subsists on the emotions of others.
This one appears to be strengthened by mental radiations of hostility, violent intentions.
It exists on the hate of others.
To put it simply. And it has acted as a catalyst, creating this situation. In order to satisfy that need, it has brought together opposing forces, provided crude instruments, in an effort to promote the most violent mode of conflict.
And kept numbers and resources balanced so that it can maintain a constant state of violence.
Without doubt, we must now put ourselves on a warlike footing, approaching our action from the perspective of a military-style campaign. That way, working together, we can combat this most grave and urgent challenge. If we have the resolve to shift our trajectory, we must start now by bringing forward our net zero target.
The money is there. If we can save the banks, then we can save the world.
If you Google climate change, you will, at the top of your search, you will get all kinds of UN resources. So we're becoming much more proactive. We own the science, and we think that the world should know it.
Taking a close look at what's around us, there is some sort of a harmony. It is the harmony of overwhelming and collective murder.
I am proud to announce that starting today, our company is now Meta.
Nobody will be safe if not everybody is vaccinated.
It changes you if you take a genetic editing. It's you who are changing.
The opportunities are immense.
I'm not terribly sure I'm going to sleep well tonight after seeing some of those videos coming in from around the world of people collapsing in quite strange ways. As if it wasn't bad enough that we're seeing young people, very young, sports stars in high school and college, collapsing on the sports field from what we're told is heart attacks, blood clots, aneurysms, sudden adult death syndrome. But now it would appear that there is emerging a worse death than sudden adult death syndrome. And that's these clips of people who are seeing something shortly before they die that we can't see. And they see it and they are literally scared to death by it. There's just terror all over their faces, and they point at it and they spin round and round. And one guy who worked on the trains actually fell under the train. He was so terrified of what he saw. Now, most of you will say, oh, well, they obviously had schizophrenia or delusions or some kind of mental disorder. That's not usually the case when you're holding down a job as a conductor on the trains. One guy was going and filling up water bottles, totally normal. Another girl was getting her nails done in a salon. These don't look like mentally ill individuals when these things are happening to them. One guy was queuing up at a health center to get something done and turned around and clearly saw something that we can't see. Does this have something to do with those IP addresses that are showing up, that are bobbing around on the screens in these command centers that they seem to have, like wartime command centers, where you can see these IP addresses? Is this a terrorist attack? Can they remote terrorize people? I just get the creepiest feeling like there's somebody somewhere enjoying all of this. No one's asking questions, no one's worried about it, and I can tell you now, I will never be the same.
Of providing nightmare fuel in my documentaries, but I think of my work as fundamentally optimistic. If people can be made aware of the techno-fascist tactics of the global predator class, they can take steps to protect themselves and chart a course toward greater health, happiness, and freedom. Maybe that's why my books and movies have been so consistently shadow banned and censored. In the most recent attempt to curtail my output at Three Graces Press, YouTube banned me for life on October 12, 2022. 5 years of artistic labor vanished in an instant. Fortunately, I had backups, but the thousands of supportive public comments are now lost forever. My thought crimes were unspecified, but if you've been watching my videos, you probably know what pissed off the powers that be. My people, the shit spotters, are outlaws in an imperium of horsecrap. But as William Burroughs said, it's satisfying work. When the only agenda that really matters is whatever best serves the interests of the predator class at any given hour, depopulating and sterilizing the working class becomes inevitable. To make sure that happens, the predators will transgress as many moral boundaries as necessary, while reaping immense material rewards in this inverted world of ours. But as James Corbett has observed, technocracy in all its facets, from the UN's 2030 agenda to the brain chips and AI godheads of the transhumanists, to the CBDC social credit surveillance state, is anti-human. It goes against nature itself. It cannot work in the long run and is destined to fail.
Your technocracy is dead on arrival!
The predator class would like us to remain willfully blind to their anti-human endeavors, or better, to eagerly collaborate in our own doom. But signs are already appearing that point toward their inevitable failure. One of their more high-toned gaslighting outlets, The Atlantic, owned by Laurene Powell Jobs, the multi-billionaire widow of Steve Jobs, and a notorious friend to Ghislaine Maxwell, published an essay on the day of Halloween 2022 by Brown University economist Emily Oster, calling for a pandemic amnesty to pardon the criminal acts of all the brainwashed COVIDian cultists, the murderous corporate sociopaths, and every other useful idiot who chose the wrong side In the predator classes, cold-blooded, coordinated, pandemic-excused assault on the rest of us. Emily claims we were all in the dark in the early days of COVID, and even the people who got almost everything right were only guessing. So all the fear-porn-addled big pharma propagandists, like Emily herself, who wanted to treat anti-vaxxers like social pariahs, should now be allowed a free pass. But that's just self-serving bullshit. Some of us cared enough to read widely suppressed medical research papers, and we knew from the start that the plandemic was a scam.
Fuck that.
The hypocritical zealots and self-righteous twats in Emily's camp did not. I like how the Daily Skeptic's Michael P. Sanger responded to Emily's mea culpa. There's a lot wrong here. You don't get to advocate policies that do extraordinary harm to others against their wishes, and then say, we didn't know any better at the time. Ignorance doesn't work as an excuse when the policies involved abrogating your fellow citizens' rights under an indefinite state of emergency, while censoring and canceling those who weren't as ignorant. I also found myself enjoying the fierce sarcasm of a Claremont Institute senior fellow named Matthew J. Peterson, who tested the censorship policies of Twitter's new owners when he lampooned Emily's pandemic amnesty pleas by writing, "Hey, sorry you lost your job because of the vax that doesn't work and your grandmother died alone and you couldn't have a funeral and your brother's business was needlessly destroyed and your kids have weird heart problems. But let's just admit we were all wrong and call it truce, eh? It's too bad we shut the entire economy down and took on tyrannical powers that have never been used before in this country. Looking back, you should have been able to go to church and use public parks while we let people riot in the streets. But it was a confusing time for everyone. Hey, I'm sorry we scared the hell out of you and lied for years and persecuted and censored anyone who disagreed. But there was an election going on, and we really wanted to beat Donald Trump. So it was important to radically politicize the science, even if it destroyed your children's lives. Okay, yes, we said unvaccinated people should die and not get health care while never questioning Big Pharma once.
Rest in peace, Wheezy.
But we are compassionate people, which is why even though we shut down the entire economy, we also bankrupted the nation and caused inflation. You're welcome. Let's be friends.
I became cold, and for an instant I seemed to black out. And then I heard a strange voice come from me. I can't remember.
The voice said, death tonight, and the number 13. And then he said it would be one of us.
Pandemic amnesty isn't the answer. We need pandemic tribunals, something like the Nuremberg trials 2.0, so this kind of crap never happens again. Mistakes were made with malice aforethought. People like Bill Gates, Larry Fink, Stefan Bancel, Albert Bourla, and Anthony Fauci need to be held accountable for their crimes against humanity, instead of being allowed to profit from them.
Now we're getting some information after a while, we have time, to find out just how bad the collateral damage has been. Here's just a few cases. The pandemic erased 2 decades of progress in math and reading. See, right away I gotta say, this pisses me off. I see these headlines all the time. The pandemic didn't do that. The way we handled the pandemic did that. The pandemic certainly was a thing. But let's not just say the pandemic, because it was not written in stone that we had to handle it the way we did. ACT scores are the lowest in 30 years. Anxiety and depression way up. The body mass index doubled for kids 2 to 19. Drug overdose deaths. Murders way up. Inflation at a 40-year high. Domestic violence increased. And my favorite, car crashes. They couldn't figure this out. Like way, way, way up. And Finally, I love this. This is the expert said. You know what it is? People just went fucking mental.
Look. They want everybody to forget and forgive everything that happened during the pandemic. We were all in the dark. We were all afraid. Like, nah, bitch. Like, that was like we all got kidnapped and put together on an island, and then all of y'all bastards were like, we should eat them. And we're like, what the fuck? And then now they took us off the island, and we're just looking at you on the ride home like, and you're like, oh, wasn't that crazy? And we're like, nah, bitch. You tried to eat us. I didn't kick you out of no stores. I didn't ruin your job. I didn't tell you you couldn't come to the family reunion. I didn't tell you you had to drop dead of a heart attack because you didn't get the jab, so you're not welcome at this hospital. There ain't nothing to forgive on my side, baby boo. This is a you problem, and we're still talking about it.
Yes, there have been corrupt empires. Yes, they manipulate. Yes, there are secret societies. Yes, there have been oligarchies throughout history. And yes, today, in 2002, there is a tyrannical organization calling itself the New World Order, pushing for worldwide government, a cashless society, open borders, total and complete tyranny, where human beings are absolutely worthless. There's 6.25+ billion of us, and the globalists have said it many times, there's too many of us, we're causing a problem. We need to be culled at the tune of 80%. It's amazing to talk about that, but it's the globalists, the UN, their own public statements, and they've convinced a lot of liberals and elitist conservatives and others that by going along with this, that we're intelligent members of society. It's the ultimate Malthus world view.
You know, Matt and I are constantly talking about Malthusian theory.
Malthusian theory, I know. I, Thomas Robert Malthus, have merely done you the service of stating the obvious, that the demographics of our situation equal death.
It's the excuse of tyrants.
World's a hungry place. And the darkest things are the hungriest. Can't do nothing about that. What you can do is turn what they come for against them.
Did the devil make the world while God was sleeping? Here you lose a little every day. I remember when a million was a million. They all have ways to make you pay.
Likely there is no public figure or public health figure that has made a greater error in judgment than Dr. Fauci. The error in judgment was to fund gain-of-function research in a totalitarian country, fund research that allowed them to create superviruses that in all likelihood accidentally leaked into the public and caused 7 million people to die. Think about it. This is right up there with decisions, some of them malevolent or military, to kill millions of people. Talk about errors. You think he might apologize to the world for funding research that allowed superviruses to be created in a lab that was not properly outfitted for safety, that people were already reporting was dangerous, to support that type of research and then to look the other way and say nothing to see here and to cover it up. For the last 2 years, he's been covering his tracks, but we've got him red-handed and he won't get away. Historically, he will be remembered for one of the worst judgments in the history of modern medicine.
On and on and on. Does anybody feel safe in a country or a world where the government doesn't just allow this, but helps it happen?
The world is full of ugly people doing ugly things. It never seems to end. There's a meanness to human existence that must be dealt with. According to the idiot dream logic of our self-appointed overlords,
the speed of science
can no longer be slowed down by safety concerns. Research programs in genomics, nanotechnology, and bioengineering can't be put on hold, even if they pose an existential threat to humanity. Big Pharma's profiteering must take precedence over the lives of our children.
Young people are dying.
That cutthroat corporate compliance was on full display when the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices voted 15-0 to add the COVID vaccines to the childhood vaccination schedule, thereby guaranteeing manufacturers full liability protection forever. Even as the most recent safety data suggests that those same mRNA shots are killing and maiming a significant percentage of formerly healthy kids. The predator class-funded eugenics laboratories in Cold Spring Harbor, Long Island, and Nazi Germany have morphed into the gene-splicing biolabs now to be found everywhere, from Ukraine to China. Despite the demonstrable harm caused by the release of the lab-created SARS-CoV-2 virus, gain-of-function research into making ever-deadlier pathogens continues unabated, with artificial intelligence helping to unlock their democidal potentialities. For instance, in just under 6 hours, a drug-developing AI came up with a list of 40,000 new biochemical weapons for aspiring mass murderers to create. And now, a Boston University biolab has combined the lethality of the original recipe SARS virus with the much higher transmissibility of the Omicron variant for a new virus that has an 80% kill rate among the lab mouse populations it infects. But we're not supposed to call that gain-of-function research, because the original recipe killed an even higher percentage of mice. Never mind that the original wasn't nearly as good at infecting them as BU's new mutant super variant.
Boston will be implementing a requirement for proof of COVID-19 vaccination.
We're supposed to trust that some sloppy grad student working at one of those biolabs won't pick his nose after handling some incredibly lethal pathogen and then pass it around by sneezing at a frat party before he gets sick enough to notice. Safety protocols are in place to make sure that never happens, right?
Yes!
Well, let's never underestimate the human capacity to fuck up or to get rich by causing harm. To cite just one example, The Intercept reported that in 2011, a ferret infected with a recombinant strain of the infamous 1918 flu virus bit a researcher at a Mount Sinai biosafety lab located in the middle of Manhattan, just 1 block away from Central Park. Since animal bites rarely transmit flu viruses, the researcher was simply sent home and told to self-quarantine for a week. But other virologists have said that was an irresponsible biosafety breach. As one of them explained, say the risk was 0.1%, but if he just happened to be unlucky, then the consequences would be absolutely gigantic. It almost seems as if the biosafety labs are flirting with mass casualties on purpose, perhaps to further our unelected overlords' agenda of total technocratic control.
Deal with this.
I find a lot of things, but this I have never found before. This is a graphene ribbon, but it's totally blue. And this is something I have never seen before. That there's a new variant, I think due to the boosters, something is shifted, something is changed. And this is a more aggressive variant because it really gets into the nervous system and into the brain. But this blue beast, I have no idea what this is. Absolutely. This is so weird.
The reason that only one drug has been made available is AZT because it's the only drug that thus far has been shown in scientifically controlled trials to be safe and effective.
Listen, Fauci actually dug up some people up in the dark that died way back from the Spanish flu and reconstituted the Spanish flu.
If and when a new strain of flu, like the Spanish flu, crops up, 5 years from now, we've made the investment.
prepare for the next one. That, I'd say will get attention this time.
We need more money to plan for the second pandemic. There's going to be another pandemic. There's going to be another pandemic.
They couldn't get monkeypox to fly, but you can bet they'll be trying out some new plague or pandemic on us soon. Some sort of hemorrhagic fever, like Marburg virus or Ebola, is the most obvious candidate, augmented perhaps with Borg particles activated by 5G frequencies. However, with over 40,000 bioweapons to choose from, there's no telling what new CRISPR gene-edited fuckery looms just beyond the horizon.
Is that what I think it is?
It's a nanovirus. One manufactured to kill humans.
And the truth is, there is something terribly wrong with this country, isn't there? Cruelty and injustice, intolerance and oppression, and where once you had the freedom to object, to think and speak as you saw fit, you now have censors and systems of surveillance coercing your conformity and soliciting your submission. How did this happen? Who's to blame? Well, certainly there are those more responsible than others, and they will be held accountable. But again, truth be told, if you're looking for the guilty, you need only look into a mirror. I know why you did it. I know you were afraid. Who wouldn't be? War, terror, disease. There were a myriad of problems which conspired to corrupt your reason and rob you of your common sense. Fear got the best of you.
COVID-19 is about the inoculation of human beings with artificial intelligence. There is an AI nanoweapon, a new biosynthetic species that is experimenting on us and exterminating us.
Your own government lies as a matter of course, as a matter of policy. The Tuskegee experiments on black men in the 30s, Henrietta Lacks.
What are they trying to do?
That's the missing piece.
But it's not hard to imagine.
An Alex Jones character based on Alex Jones.
A government driven not only by corporate greed, but a darker objective.
The takeover of America.
And then the world itself, by any means necessary, however violent, or cruel, or efficient. By severe drought, brought on by weather wars, conducted secretly using aerial contaminants and high-altitude electromagnetic waves. In a state of perpetual war. To create problem, reaction, solution scenarios to distract, enrage, and enslave American citizens at home. With tools like the Patriot Act and the National Defense Authorization Act, which abridge the Constitution in the name of national security. The militarization of police forces in cities across the U.S., the building of prison camps by the Federal Emergency Management Agency with no stated purpose. The corporate takeover of food and agriculture, pharmaceuticals and healthcare, even the military in clandestine agendas to fatten, dull, sicken, and control a populace already consumed by consumerism.
And I encourage you all to go shopping more.
A government that taps your phone, collects your data, and monitors your whereabouts with impunity. A government preparing to use that data against you when it strikes. And the final takeover begins.
The takeover of America.
By a well-oiled and well-armed multinational group of elites that will cull, kill, and subjugate.
Happening as we sit here.
It's happening all around us.
The other shoe waiting to drop.
It'll probably start on a Friday. The banks will announce a security action necessitating their computers to go offline all weekend.
Digital money will disappear.
They can just steal your money?
Followed by the detonation of strategic electromagnetic pulse bombs to knock out major grids.
What will seem like an attack on America by terrorists or Russia.
You can't say these things.
I'm going to say them tomorrow.
They're trying to get us to lower our shield.
It's fear-mongering, claptrap, isolationist, techno-paranoia, so bogus and dangerous and stupid that it borders on treason. Saying these things would be incredibly irresponsible.
It's irresponsible not to say it.
Especially if it's the truth.
Family is there, and they're getting ready to come to the microphone, so we'll listen in.
Okay. So my name's Robbie Parker. My family is one of the families that lost a child yesterday in the Sandy Hook Elementary School shootings here in Connecticut.
Alex Jones has been fined close to $1 billion for daring to debunk the official narrative on the Sandy Hook shootings. He didn't harm anyone. He just asked some rude questions.
To the families of 8 Sandy Hook victims and an FBI agent.
Yet the more odious crimes against humanity committed by Sam Bankman-Fried, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, Mark Zuckerberg, and Janet Yellen continue to go unpunished. In fact, those blatant sociopaths are celebrated as luminaries by the New York Times. You can misappropriate billions from crypto investors, deploy false flag tactics to escalate a proxy war against Russia.
This from President Zelenskyy of Ukraine. He's commented about that missile strike, and he's in no doubt. He says it is a significant escalation in the conflict and that action is needed.
You can plunder personal data from citizens across the globe to sell to any privacy-violating scumbags that want it, and repeatedly loot the U.S. Treasury on behalf of your obscenely wealthy friends until you've impoverished millions of taxpayers and retirees. But if you're famous, you absolutely cannot be allowed to question the official narratives. Look at what they did to Julian Assange. Look at what they've done to David Icke.
The Dutch government, a guy called Rutte, the Prime Minister, completely owned by the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab. Why has he just announced that the Netherlands, the second biggest exporter of food in the world, is targeting farmers to destroy them and get them off the land, which is where all these farming protests in the Netherlands have come from? Why are you doing that? If people depend on you for what's left of the food, you control them. Where food is abundant and cheap, you do not control it. Where energy is cheap and abundant, you do not control it. Scarcity equals dependency equals control. And that's why they're targeting the food chain, they're targeting energy supply, they're targeting everything.
Look at what they're doing to Kanye West.
I went from being a multi-billionaire to not being able to use my Apple Pay. Well, if this could happen to me, this could happen to other Americans.
If you can't see by now that the world is satanically inverted, I don't think I can help you.
This is a trainer, but come to find out, he's actually Canadian intelligence, but this is my trainer. So it shows you the kind of handlers that are around the superstars in California, right? So it says, I'm going to help you one of a couple ways. First, you and I sit down and have a loving and open conversation, but you don't use cuss words. And everything that is discussed is based in fact, and that's some crazy stuff that a dumb friend of yours told you, or you saw on the tweet. Second option, I have you institutionalized again, where they medicate the crap out of you, and you go back to zombie land forever. Play date with the kids just won't be the same. This is the way a Hollywood trainer was talking to me to force me to go and apologize, right?
If your ultimate goal is to be famous, then you're gonna do a lot to get there, like sign your name in blood in a contract with the devil.
What's happening to all of America? What's happening to all the world? If you have an opinion, even if you speak up, there's so many people that they're working a regular job and they know if they say anything to their manager, then they'll lose their position, they'll lose their job. Right. You know, they tried to destroy me in press. They tried to destroy all of my businesses at the same time, and the world saw it. You know, as far as none of the celebrities, so this just shows you all celebrities are controlled. You don't see no celebrities talking about the Balenciaga situation, right? So that just shows you all of these celebrities out here, don't let them influence you in any way because they're controlled by the people who really influence the world.
Don't do this, Derek.
Listen to your friend Billy Zane. He's a cool dude. He's trying to help you out.
Logic is an enemy and truth is a nurse. Logic is an enemy and truth is a nurse. Logic is an enemy and truth is a nurse. Logic is an enemy and truth is a nurse.
Assuring us that he's going to deal with it responsibly, but $110 billion, American people aren't seeing that kind of money. It's coming out of their pockets.
Well, it's coming out of all of our pockets, but it's money well spent.
History is simply the propaganda that sticks. In a world that celebrates blatant liars and persecutes truth-tellers, it should be understood that the history we're taught is rife with falsehoods.
In my humble opinion, this is very much like what Ronald Reagan did back in the 80s, and I do have some experience with that. I know that makes me a lot older than most of our viewers, but in fact, he believed in supporting freedom fighters. He did it in Latin America, he did it in Angola, Guinea-Bissau, Mozambique, he did it in Afghanistan. Those people were willing, as the Ukrainian people are, to use their blood and our bullets.
While at the NSC, I worked most closely with three people. Mr. Robert C. McFarlane, Admiral John Poindexter, and CIA Director William Casey.
COVID war, to Ukraine war, to World War. World War III has begun.
We're deep into World War III now, whether we all recognize it or not. Welcome to It's a war waged by the globalists against the rest of us, using technology and tactics that most of us can barely comprehend. like Operation Gladio-style acts of false flag terrorism. Supply chain sabotage and fiat currency inflation to foment scarcity and high prices.
Now they're saying that inflation was caused by supply chain disruptions. There she is, Miss Faccia Brute. We're the same age, Marona me. Wouldn't be dating you, baby cakes.
It's getting so bad that even my neighbors on the Upper West Side are dumpster diving now.
So Joe made a promise, if you remember, back on the campaign trail. He made this promise to rebuild the middle class. It's why he ran, and it's the North Star that has guided his... Shut the fuck up!
They're rolling out 15-minute city smart grids for the ultimate in crowd control. You'll do nothing, and you'll be happy. Nanoscale biological computing interfaces to get inside our skulls. Geoengineering programs to make EMF radiation warfare and weather modification possible. And perhaps most pernicious of all, the merger of gene editing and nanotechnology to create synthetic bioweapons that can be injected or dispersed as aerosols in descending cold air masses to sicken, sterilize, kill, or control us all. And where's Dr. Charles Lieber hiding out these days? Have you even wondered? His sentencing date was set for January 11th of this year. But there can be no doubt he was handing over some cutting-edge nanotech fuckery to his handlers while he was out on bail. I will remember you. Lately, I've taken to slinging a camera around my neck and going for long, random walks around New York City, looking for chance to pawn fragments of wabi-sabi beauty. A Bridget sunset, a golden puppy, Asian girls in fuzzy coats, a hawk taking flight, a homeless man offering to star in a porno flick for a few extra dollars. It could be anything. Last year, while I was reading Antonio Munoz Molina's To Walk Alone in the Crowd, I ran across a passage that seemed to articulate what I've been up to in my own muddled way. Molina wrote, "While those people destroy the world, increasing their wealth immensely through the destitution of the vast majority of human beings, you want to build something, to see something through. It will not require you to squander resources or exploit anyone else. Chances are it will also be entirely useless. The most you can aspire to is to provide some stranger with a little company." I'm trying to capture the spurious poetry of the city streets during what feels like the last year I'll be here. When you can see the invisible war taking place with its silent weapons, as I can, you either accept the fact that your time may be limited, and you become okay with that, or you turn into a fearful paranoiac in an urban labyrinth of mirrors. I'm not paranoid, and I'm not afraid. If anything, I just seem to have more inbuilt capacity for living with uncomfortable realities than most people. But my relative sanity doesn't make me sanguine about everything that's transpired during the last 3 years. When the COVID psyop rolled out, the majority of my fellow New Yorkers seemed all too willing to give up their freedoms. I was disappointed to see so little of the city's once famed fuck you attitude. And in case anyone hasn't yet figured it out, docility during an unwarranted push toward medical martial law can get you killed. Refer back to the Nazis' Action T4 program if you don't believe me. Despite the clear warnings in my videos, almost everyone I know submitted to the COVIDian cult and its offerings of tyranny and foreseeable harms. Correlation doesn't always equal causation, But it's a statistical fact that our collective lifespan estimates have been plummeting ever since the mRNA jabs became a thing. And now, according to the latest poll, over 1 in 4 Americans believe COVID-19 vaccines caused the death of someone they knew. In my case, that would be my mother, paralyzed and then killed by a blood clot in her brain. Were people coerced into getting the shots? That's undeniable. Did violations of the Nuremberg Code occur? Absolutely. There was a question I kept seeing asked throughout the pandemic. How would you have handled living in Nazi Germany during the 1930s? Now we all know.
You know that unwelcome guest everyone wishes would just leave already? That's COVID-19. That's why I got the new updated booster, designed to help protect against recent Omicron variants. Got it?
Those of us who refuse to fall into line like good Germans, or depersonalized robots and zombies, were reminded of some hard truths that should be more widely acknowledged. Mass censorship during a pandemic can lead to mass murder. There's no informed consent when corporations and governments conspire to hide medically induced harms.
I really do believe that the federal government is captured, and it's captured by corporate interests. The entire U.S. population, as well as the world, has to understand they can no longer take these COVID vaccines. They are toxic and lethal to and ineffective, that they have completely failed. They can only be viewed as harmful and they need to be stopped.
And does it damage the brain? You bet it does. Does it damage the heart? Yes. The liver? Yes. The bone marrow? Yes. It causes all sorts of harm in the human body. We should have stopped this before it ever started.
It's a misinformation from the CDC, the FDA, the American Board of Obstetrics and Gynecology, the American College of OBGYN, the Society of Maternal Fetal Medicine. It's a misinformation from those organizations that is causing a lot of death and injury in my women of reproductive age, my pregnant women, and my preborn babies. And it's got to stop, and it's got to stop now.
And for the vaccines broadly, we have no idea what's going to happen long term now that they're in the body. Studies suggest that the vaccines and the spike protein that's produced from them never leaves the human body.
You said it was 100% effective, then 90%, then 80%, then 70%. But we now know that the vaccines do not stop transmission. Why did you keep that secret?
Have a nice day.
Have a nice day. Why did you keep that secret?
You think about this. I got expelled from Instagram because of vaccine misinformation. But Instagram and Facebook cannot point to one single erroneous statement that I ever made. Everything we post is vetted, it is sourced and cited to government databases or peer-reviewed publications. When they use the term vaccine misinformation, they are using it as a euphemism for any statement that departs from official government policies and pharmaceutical industry profit-taking. It has nothing to do whether it's true or false. It only has to do with what the political implications are. And who is doing this censorship? It's government officials in league with Bill Gates, with Larry Ellison, with Mark Zuckerberg, with Sergey Brin from Google, and with all of these internet titans. They have engineered not only the destruction of our democracy and our civil rights, but they have engineered the biggest shift of wealth in human history. $3.8 trillion from working people to these handful of billionaires, many of them from Silicon Valley. This pandemic has impoverished the world and created 500 new billionaires. And those are the people who are strip mining our economies and making themselves rich. And is it a coincidence that these are the same people who are censoring criticism of the government policies that are bringing them trillions of dollars?
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Mass media lies can lead to mass atrocities. The most dangerous lies seduce us into wars, where tax dollars are wasted on weaponry. And conditions of starve or serve come into play.
It starts with the lie, and then it goes to the war, and then the war creates, obviously, death, destruction, all that, but it destroys economies, which creates black markets for human trafficking, organ trafficking, mercenary soldiers, all this other shit derives from the wars, as well as the starvation and disease and things that wouldn't exist had there not been a war, or blown up their infrastructure, or blow up their sewage treatment centers like we did in Iraq. But all that starts with the lie. And the lie, whether it's about WMDs or babies on incubators or pre-crimes or gassing your own people, whatever the bullshit is reiterated by mass media. And our entire mass media is Zionist occupied. So of course they're gonna lie and get us involved in wars with Israel's enemies in the Middle East. All that shit stops if you just tell the fucking truth. Like, without their ability to deceive, the evil has no power for the murder and rape and the rest of it that comes after. You have to strike the root. The truth will set you free, right? Well, tell the truth where? Because it's not going to be on the three-letter networks. These are billion-dollar industries run by Zionists. That's not going to change. Social media was the only place, and now they're working with the FBI and stuff, as we see.
The Western media calls Dugin all of these names and gives him all of these titles, all of these epithets, so that they can draw this blood-curdling conclusion that Dugin and his daughter were legitimate targets. When you, in effect, celebrate the targeting of Russian civilians, a scholar, a fellow who spends most of his time in libraries, along with his daughter, when you call that an attractive way of fighting this war, you have guaranteed that Russian resolve has been decisively galvanized against you. But more than that, I think this coverage proves, in my opinion, that the Western media has collectively become the monster they claim Putin and Russia to be. The media has become the monster they purportedly abhor.
History is simply the propaganda that sticks. In a world that celebrates blatant liars and persecutes truth-tellers, it should be understood that the history we're taught is rife with falsehoods.
We must be skeptical of absolutely everything. Above all, this is a war of propaganda.
Dr. Matthew Alford, lecturer in politics, languages and international studies at the University of Bath. By all means say if you demur from the three of our conclusions, but if you don't demur, deal please with the issue I raise, which is what does it say about Europe that would allow itself to be attacked by its chief ally and yet continue to cover it up and follow their orders nonetheless?
I think it says that Europe is accepting its role as a subordinate power in the same way that Britain has long accepted its role since the mid-1950s as a subordinate power within the world international system, playing second fiddle or third fiddle or fourth fiddle to the interests of the United States. I think that the United States, we must remember that every year the United States produces these strategic documents for how it wants to run the world. If you ever take a look at any of those, as I know that you have, they are all about full spectrum dominance, about totally dominating every bloc within the world, which includes the European Union.
But how do their people feel? The German people are a great people, a huge people. Their country is the powerhouse of Europe. Why have they gone so quietly into this good night?
Well, I'm not sure that the people of Europe are going to be hoodwinked for that long, because public opinion can change when material conditions change, as they will, of course, over the winter. But the power of propaganda, as in overt, deliberate construction of lies, does take quite some time for people to see through that.
There is no such thing as history. History does not exist. There is no such thing as history, there's only historians. You cannot visit history, you can't go there and prove anything or disprove anything. And the witnesses of history are subjective opinions about textual writing historians. Remarkably, which I always find rather strange and unhappy, is the fact that most of our attitudes towards history are not about images, they're about text. There are hundreds and thousands of historians all over the world in every language giving you their opinion. So history is only an opinion. There's nothing to prove. You might say there are documents, and are the documents truthful? But again, you know that most historians are liars.
Schools train people to be ignorant with style. They give you the equipment that you need to be a functional ignoramus. American schools do not equip you to deal with things like logic. They don't give you the criteria by which to judge between good and bad in any medium or format. And they prepare you to be a usable victim for a military-industrial complex that needs manpower.
During the making of Technocrats and Tribulations over the last 2 years, I've been thinking about the globalists' sinister plans all too often.
We're not doing this the way you want it.
Wandering around looking for cracked beauty in the city I still love helps me forget for a while, but my mind apparently isn't zen enough to let it all go. I've been having trouble sleeping. To remedy that, I've been rereading Gravity's Rainbow whenever I'm up past midnight, to soothe my overcaffeinated brain with Thomas Pynchon's descriptions of an equally surreal and chaotic time in our history, World War II. Late in the book, on page 529 of my copy, Pynchon suggests that
war was never political at all. Politics is all theater, all just to keep people distracted. Secretly, it was being dictated instead by the needs of technology, by a conspiracy between human beings and techniques, by something that needed the energy burst of war, crying, money be damned. The very life of insert name of nation is at stake. The meaning most likely. Dawn is nearly here. I need my night's blood. My funding. More. The real prize were cries of allocation and priority, not among firms. It was only staged to look that way, but among different technologies, plastics, electronics, aircraft, and their needs which were only understood by the ruling elite.
Substitute GMOs, artificial intelligence, and satellites for plastics, electronics, and aircraft, and you can begin to see the parallels to our own technocracy-crazed era. But Pynchon also imagined technology's response to his theorizing.
Go ahead, capitalize the T on technology, deify it, if it'll make you feel less responsible. But it puts you in with the neutered, brother. In with the eunuchs, keeping the harem of our stolen earth for the numb and joyless hard-ons of human sultans, human elite with no right at all to be where they are.
We might make mistakes on a cosmic scale. In particular, governments, corporations, and armies are likely to use technology to enhance human skills that they need, like intelligence and discipline, while neglecting other human skills, like compassion, artistic sensitivity, and spirituality.
There was this very close relationship between big tech and the US security state that was a core part of the Snowden story, and that was also a core part of the Twitter files revelations. I don't think there's a big leap between spying on citizens unconstitutionally and censoring what we can hear, because they're ultimately geared toward the same goal, which is controlling domestic populations, keeping them in line, making sure they can't provide meaningful resistance or defiance of the interests of the US government and the power factions that they serve.
When a new technology is used to blight our lives, rather than to improve the overall human condition, we should ask ourselves whether it's a gift from the angels or a Faustian tool from hell, and then act accordingly. We still might have time to dismantle the globalist control systems and disempower all those who would poison the world for profits. But don't make the mistake of calling that resistance. It has to be a war.
How powerful exactly are the big pharmaceutical companies in this country? Consider the news that did not break today. The pro-transparency news organization, Project Veritas, just released an undercover video of a Pfizer executive bragging on camera about how his company conducts a kind of Frankenstein science, manipulating COVID viruses for profit, imperiling potentially the entire world, doing it in secret, possibly in violation of federal law, bragging about this. And you would think every reporter in this country would be itching to follow up on it, calling Pfizer, telling the public about it. But no, that's not happening.
Pfizer ultimately is thinking about mutating COVID?
Well, that's not what we say to the public. No. We're exploring, no. You know how the virus keeps mutating?
Yeah.
Well, one of the things we're exploring is, why don't we just mutate it ourselves so we can preemptively develop new vaccines, right? So we have to do that. If we're going to do that, though, there's a risk of, as you could imagine, no one wants to be having a pharma company mutating viruses. It be very controlled to make sure that this virus that you mutate doesn't create something stones everywhere.
Release the Kraken!
And prevention scientists have named this subvariant Kraken.
It's not officially called Kraken, it is just the nickname given for now because we ran out or have not been given a Greek letter name for it just yet. But let's get to what it is. XBB 1.5, that is the new variant first found in the US.